Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to talk about the red heifers in Israel. It's been a little while since we've talked about this. The last that I talked about this on the channel was 4 months ago. 2 videos. One where I was talking to Rabbi Gerfine, and by the way, I will be talking to him again in the future. I've talked to him. I want to reduce it down to just like maybe once a month. We were doing it every other week, but so don't worry, he's coming back. And then there was also a video I did 4 months ago called Red Heifer and Third Temple Update. Very close now. So I was just kind of randomly thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking more about it today, and I wanted to see, well, just how close are we? Now, let me explain, okay? Why would this be of interest to us, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Well, I don't know that it is, but we know that there's going to be a temple in Jerusalem. I have the idea that it's probably the BYU Jerusalem Center, that it can be renovated. No, the only reason or the only thing that we can't do with it is use it for proselyting. There is no other agreement. Okay. At any time, it could be renovated and turned into a temple. I don't know that that's going to happen, but the Lord can do whatever he wants. So that's like my main theory that I entertain. But I also don't exclude the possibility that the actual third temple will be built on the Temple Mount. And in order for that to happen, it seems that it would be done by the Jews themselves. But in order for them to do that, they have to have this red heifer because it has to do with purification in order to go up to the temple and resume temple service. And they've been trying to find a red heifer that is pure according to the law, and they haven't been able to do so until recently. As far as I know, they're still red and they still comply with Jewish law. I pulled together all the most recent articles and stuff that I could find, and I made a new spreadsheet where I show you the different I'll show you the different heifers that I know about, their ages, and when they're going to turn 2 years and 1 day. Because at that point, that's when they can be used for sacrifice, to be burned, to get their ashes, to be used to purify, the Kohanim, the priests, and the Jews that go to the Temple Mount. Okay, so it may be important for us, if this is how things play out, if the Jews themselves build the third temple and it resembles the temples from before, the first and second temple, as far as I know, that's what's going to happen, because you have this main organization called the Temple Institute that have built everything for the temple, all the instruments, the clothing, everything. They're the ones, as far as I know, that are heading up this whole red heifer thing. And their plans is that it would basically look like the second temple. So if that's how things go, and that's how prophecy plays out, then yes, the red heifer is important. Not necessarily for us, doctrinally speaking, but for the Jews, in order for them to get the green light, according to their religion, to build the temple. Does it make sense? I'm going to talk about more about our beliefs toward the end. We've talked about it before when it comes to animal sacrifice and stuff like that. We'll talk about that at the end. So before we get into it, let me give you the Flood the Earth challenge. Okay, so I haven't updated it since the last time. We're at 7,438 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared, and 796 people that have joined. Just 4 away from 800, which is the next milestone. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to join the challenge. Just share a Book of Mormon, whether it's digital or physical. Let me know in the comments, or send me an email and include the word flood. Okay, hashtag flood. That way I can easily find your comment or your email and then update the tracker. Okay, so good job, everybody. Now back to the red heifer. So I searched high and low. I searched the places that I've seen news about the red heifer before. I went to the Temple Institute's Facebook page, and their most recent update, I did a search for both heifer and heifers, plural. And it seems that the most recent post is from June 30th. Okay. So nothing really recently. I went to their website, and they have a section for to teach visitors, people that are interested about the red heifer and what it's all about. But there's no update there. I went to Israel 365, and the most recent article that they have is from August 4th. Okay. This is the most recent thing that I have at the moment. There is this this interview on September 15th where they discuss the red heifer, but it's an hour and 5 minutes long, and I haven't watched it yet. So I may do that, and if anything comes up, I'll let you know. But for this video, the most recent information that I have is from August 4th. Okay. Now, I wanted to try and figure out how many red heifers are there that are in Israel right now that are candidates to be burnt for their ashes. How many? How old are they? Because I remember in previous videos coming across how old they were at the time. So I was like, well, I'll just take those ages and then I'll put it on a spreadsheet and we'll figure out when they'll turn 2 years old in one day. So the first that I know of comes from this article dated September 16th, 2022. By the way, the Jerusalem Post also did their own article about this, but we'll read from the Israel 365 article. Israel 365 exclusive, red heifers arrive in Israel. Watch. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. The Temple Institute in Boneh, Israel, made a huge step towards reinstating the temple service on Thursday when 5 red heifers landed at Ben Gurion International Airport. Okay, so here's the first. I basically have 3 different sets or 3 different sources of what seem to be different groups or individual cows or heifers. A heifer is a cow that hasn't had a calf yet. It's called a heifer. Once she has a calf, then she's a cow. Okay. The red heifer was the main component in the biblically mandated process of ritual purification for impurity that results from proximity or contact with a dead body. Because the elements needed for this ceremony have been lacking since the destruction of the Second Temple, all Jews today are considered ritually impure, thereby preventing the return of the temple service. The Temple Institute launched its Red Heifer program about a decade ago, led by Rabbi Azariah Ariel. But even in temple times, an animal that fulfilled the biblical requirements was exceedingly rare. Failing to produce a suitable candidate from ranchers in Israel, the Temple Institute began investigating alternative sources for a red heifer. Boneh Israel, an organization that connects Christian lovers of Israel to the Holy Land, stepped in to help. Led by Byron Stinson, a native Texan, Boneh Israel understood ranchers. Okay, and here's the rancher right here that I guess was able to provide these red heifers. Okay. Quote, I didn't set out to do this right now, but I'm probably the best red heifer hunter in Texas, Byron quipped. The Bible says to bring a red cow to purify Israel, and I may not understand it, but I'm just doing what the Bible said. The prophecies came true and the Jews are back in Israel. Now they need to build a temple, but it's like buying a really nice car. Okay, I'll stop. If you don't have the key, you aren't going anywhere. The red heifer is the key to making the temple work like it's supposed to. A team of rabbis from the Temple Institute flew out to inspect the calves last year. The requirements are incredibly demanding, requiring that there be no more than 2 non-red hairs on the entire calf. It must also never have been used for any labor or have been impregnated. The heifer must be 2 years and 1 day old to be suitable for the ceremony. Sometimes a calf that is perfectly red when it is young develops black or white hairs as it grows older, or may develop a blemish. Sometimes the colored hairs fall out or disappear. Certifying the calf requires a complete and intensive inspection in which a rabbi knowledgeable in the law in the laws goes over the entire calf with a magnifying glass. And it appears like that's what's happening right here in this Jerusalem Post article with this photo. An Israeli rabbi uses a magnifying glass to examine a cow named Zipporah, trying to determine whether the animal is a red heifer. That sounds like a lot of fun. I've had cows. We haven't had any. Well, last what we had were some steers, but I sold them a few months ago, and we're probably gonna wait until springtime to buy some calves. But with my experience owning cows, that doesn't sound very fun. Doable, but not very fun. The cows were between 5 to 8 months old. Okay, so there's our marker right there. Okay. To be suitable for the red heifer ceremony, the cow must be 2 years and 1 day old. So these heifers will be raised in Israel until they reach the proper age. Okay, later, from the time of Moses, who personally prepared the first heifer, until the destruction of the temple, only 9 red heifers were prepared. Nonetheless, this was sufficient to maintain the ritual purity of the entire nation for almost 2,000 years. According to Jewish tradition, there will only be 10 red heifers in human history, with the 10th heifer ushering in the Messianic era. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, or Maimonides, the most renowned medieval Jewish scholar known by the acronym Rambam, wrote in his explanation that the mitzvah, which is a commandment, that the 10 red heifer will be accomplished by the King, the Messiah. May he be revealed speedily. Amen. May it be God's will. Okay, so there's a lot riding on this as far as Jews are concerned. And we have our first markers. So this article is from September 16th. I went through and found the actual day because it said it was on a Thursday in that month. So it was on the 15th of September. Here, let me do this. Let me freeze these rows, or sorry, these columns, I mean. Okay, there we go. We'll go over to these first ones. Okay, so on September 15th, they were brought to Israel, and the article said that they were between 5 and 8 months old, and that there were 5 of them. And then I have the source right here in case you come to my spreadsheet and you want to refer back to this. The source is right here. Okay, so I put the 2 possibilities. I went from the lowest range to the highest, from 5 months to 8 months. So column F is for any one of those calves that are 5 months old at that time, and then column G is if they're 8 months old. Okay, so here you have the years and the months to the left, and each one of these is how old they are in that month. So it turns out, okay, so if the 5-month-old was born in April, then it turned 1 month old in May, 2 months old in June, and so forth until September 2022. Okay, September 2022. And then here in column G is the 8-month-olds, or the 8-month-old if it's only one. So we just continue on until we reach 2 years. And it turns out for this, that would either be January of 2024 or April of 2024. Very interesting, especially all the things that are converging this upcoming year. Remember, let me pull this up really quick. We have these really interesting numbers that are coming together in 2024. So, for example, President Nelson will enter his 7th year as president of the church. And then until September of next year, he'll still be in his 100th year of life. And then he'll turn 100 on September 9th of 2024. Up until this point, and until next General Conference, he's given 40 talks as president of the church, if you don't count the Hosanna Shout instructions, and then 111 talks total as an apostle. On April 7th of 2024, he will have been an apostle for 40 years. And 2024 is 20 years since 2004, where President Oaks gave that really interesting Second Coming talk, and he listed out all the different signs of the times, like a bullet point list. And from that year, there has been an increase in different natural disasters and just different things like volcanic activity that has increased since 2004. So have earthquakes, or at least fatalities from earthquakes have increased dramatically since that time. Okay, the April General Conference will be exactly 5 years from the time that President Nelson said time is running out in the April 2019 General Conference. And then, of course, it'll be 7 years since the 2017 eclipse. So it's a lot of stuff lining up. Now, on top of that, we potentially have these heifers, and if these end up being significant, then this is just another thing to add to the list. So, okay, so there's them, these 5. Okay, but there's more. Let's see. After this news came out, okay, just a little bit later that month on September 30th, there's this article. Hamas warns red heifers signal a new stage in the Judaization of the mosques on Temple Mount. Calls for violence. Okay, so it's really interesting looking at this now that this war has started this year. I'm not saying that the war started because of this by itself, but this probably didn't help, because there are some people that are really, really serious about this third temple. Like I said, we have the Temple Institute. You come to their website, go to study tools, vessels, and then down to gallery. And you can see all the things that they painstakingly reconstructed for the temple. And there was a lot of effort and a lot of research that they did because they wanted everything to be as kosher as possible. There was a lot of study that they did into the gems that are supposed to be used for the breastplate of the high priest. That's what you're looking at right here. Even down to the dyes. Okay, not just like any regular dye would do. Like they wanted to do this all the authentic way. So the showbread table, wine libation cup, and then you have all these things. These are all ready to go, ready to be used in the third temple. They have an altar, like a portable altar that's been constructed that is kosher, that they can quickly assemble if like there was some kind of go-ahead given to them, that they could quickly assemble on the Temple Mount itself and start performing sacrifices. So they are ready to go. And so, I mean, obviously, if you and I can see this, if the Jews can see this, then so can the Palestinians and Hamas and everybody else. So they're kind of not happy about this. All right. So anyway, the next one that I have comes from this this YouTube video by the Israel guys called "These Red Heifers May Be Used in the Third Temple" special interview. And the guy's name escapes me, but I'll put the link for this in the description below in case you want to watch the whole thing. It's only 15 minutes and 43 seconds. But he's one that's familiar with the red heifers, and in this video, he says they have to be the age which is above the age of 2, and the ones we have now are about a year and 4 months old. Okay? And this is as of April 4th, 2023. At that time, about a year and 4 months old. So that's 16 months. So let's go back to my spreadsheet. And I've added this one on here. Now, I don't know how many he's referring to. I don't know when they came to Israel or anything like that. All he says is that there are some, it sounds like he's talking about multiple red heifers, that there are a few red heifers that are 16 months old as of April 2023. And I actually have two columns for this because it could be that those calves turned 16 months old in March and were still 16 months old in April. So, for example, they may have turned 17 months old on April 23rd, for example. Or they may have turned 16 months old on the 1st of April, just a couple days before the interview. You see what I mean? So that's why you have these two columns. So in that scenario, well, if they were born in March, then last month they would have turned 2 years old in one day in November. And if they were born in April, then sometime this month is when they're going to be 2 years old in one day. So, I mean, we are basically there. But there's one more that I want to share with you. Okay, this one. Back to Israel 365 News. Biblical red heifer could bring million visitors to Samaria. This is dated July 16th, 2023. It says, hundreds of visitors flocked to Shiloh in Samaria's Binyamin region on Thursday to welcome a biblically pure red heifer. The 22-month-old cow, which was brought to Israel from the United States, found a new home at the ancient Shiloh heritage site where the biblical tabernacle once stood. In the coming month, 2 more heifers will be transported to the town, and a center will be there dedicated to research the phenomenon. The heifers will be kept in a fenced-off area, and visitors will not be able to touch the animals. So, at the very least, there's one. I don't know about these other two, but there's one that at the time of this article was 22 months old. Okay, and this was July 16th. So, of this year. So, I added this one, and that would make it a different age from all the rest of them, which would mean that in September, it would have turned 2 years old in one day. So it's kind of confusing, and I'm assuming that there are these different age groups that we've just covered. But as you can see, we are right now in that red zone. Basically between now and April. But it seems like there's already a few that are ready as of right now, or, this month or next month. We are in that time right now. And then it seems like the latest extent would be April. So that's kind of exciting. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if in any way this war going on has anything to do with this. I will say this. There are secret combinations, right? There are secret combinations. The Book of Mormon talks a lot about secret combinations. And secret combinations do not care about the truth, and they manipulate situations. They do things to bring about their goals. So that's something to think about when we think about how the war started. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but who knows how or why it actually started, whose hands are in the jar with making this come to pass, because sometimes what you see officially reported may not be the full story, and there's other things at play that wouldn't seem like they would be part of it. But so some of you know what I'm talking about, some of you don't. So whatever the case, this whole thing may in some way have to do with the red heifers, potentially. If somebody really, really wants to see this come about and actually cause a change on the Temple Mount. I mean, it'd have to be some pretty extreme stuff, I think, but maybe that's what they have planned. I don't know. We'll have to see how this war plays out. But it's interesting that the war is going on as this is happening as you have these heifers that are coming of age. So, the last thing I want to read, it's also from Israel 365, and this is the latest article from August 4th. Hebrew media claims Christians brought red heifer to Israel to establish Antichrist. And sadly, that's true. I have a playlist about the Antichrist. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to watch it, because that is not one of our doctrines, that there's going to be a single big bad Antichrist before the second coming. It's not. I'm not going to go over all that here. That's why I have a separate playlist for it. But it is an idea of certain Christian groups that there's going to be a one person Antichrist, and that he is going to sit in the temple, meaning the third temple, and proclaim himself to be God, and he's going to rule the world for a certain amount of time. I suppose 3.5 years. So whatever, just go watch my playlist. But let's read what it says here. Channel 12, a Hebrew language news site, published an article on Sunday accusing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of allocating resources to a project aimed at building a third temple on the Temple Mount. The article blames Christians for bringing red heifers to Israel. The Channel 12 article cites a project by Bonei Israel, an organization that brings together Jews and Christians. In cooperation with the Temple Institute, Bonei Israel successfully imported 5 red calves in September to Israel from Texas for the purpose of raising them for the biblical commandment. The article noted that the Temple Institute was founded by Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, who was a former member of the right-wing Kach party, which was declared illegal by the Israeli government. The article claimed that Rabbi Ariel is the quote-unquote spiritual patron for the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir. And by the way, he is a very controversial figure. The people on the left basically hate him. And he's very provocative. He does a lot of things that usually exacerbates this conflict in this ongoing conflict between Arabs and Israelis. The article claimed that the Netanyahu government is complicit. Quote, a few years ago, the Jerusalem ministry submitted a design proposal for the construction of the Mount of Olives promenade, and officials who were involved in the planning claimed that its route is intended to serve, among other things, the future ceremony of burning the cow. The article wrote, end quote. The article wrote, also blaming the Ministry of Agriculture for complicity by issuing permits for importing the red calves. The article noted that the ministry exempted the calves from being ear tagged, as it would have rendered them unfit for the mitzvah, or the commandment. The article also noted that the Minister for Jerusalem and Heritage, Nathaniel Isaac, attended the ceremony at Ben Gurion International Airport when the calves arrived, citing this as proof that Netanyahu's government is paving the way for the third temple. The article quoted Dr. Tomer Persico, a research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute, who claimed that Christians are involved in the project in order to help bring about the temple of the Antichrist, quote unquote. Quote, the Antichrist, the Satan, one might say, needs to come here and defile the temple, notes Perisco. Then the war of Gog and Magog begins, in which 2/3 of the Jews die and 1/3 of them convert to Christianity. The world doesn't exactly last either, such is biblical disaster, end quote. The Ministry of Heritage responded to Channel 12 by stating that the project did not receive funding from the government. Quote, the arrival of the red cows in Israel was not carried out or budgeted for by the ministry. The Director General and the ministry participated in the ceremony of their arrival privately and during the tenure of the previous government. The plan for the promenade on the Temple Mount, on the Mount of Olives was intended for tourism purposes and not for the benefit of the Red Cow fire. So, by the way, this is referring to the fact that the location where they would burn the red heifer, it's on the Mount of Olives and within sight of the Holy of Holies. Okay, so I guess the way that it was done in ancient times is you'd have like the gate, like what's now the Golden Gate. It was open, and from the Mount of Olives you could see through there and then through the temple into, I mean, not literally into the Holy of Holies, but because I don't think that they had the veil open, but like in that, in that direction to where you could look inside the temple from the Temple Mount. Okay. The article raised an uproar among the Arab media. Al Jazeera cited Dr. Saleh Lufti, quote, a researcher in Jewish, Zionist, and political affairs, as saying that in light of the current Palestinian and regional circumstances, the Netanyahu government, the time is ripe to realize the myth of building the alleged third temple. Okay, the time is ripe, according to him. Quote, all parties in the government coalition, including the Likud party, agree among themselves on the need to continue preparations and preparations for the construction of the temple, the preparation of priest clothing, the raising of the red cow, and the strengthening of the position of the chief rabbi, Lufti wrote. He went on to claim that the idea of rebuilding the temple, quote, has become rooted even among large segments of the Israeli secular and liberal movement, as well as among circles of the so-called Jewish Zionist left, end quote. Despite the preparations and the allocation of budgets, Lufti reasoned that the Netanyahu government is not currently building the temple in the courtyards of the Temple Mount, pointing out that this would be a, quote, a suicidal step for the Israeli entity, which would ignite a religious uprising in historic Palestine, taking into account that it will spread to the Arab and Islamic worlds, which will expose the region to a religious war, end quote. Well, no, it continues. Sorry. The temple includes a biblical council, Sanhedrin, as well, deciding and prosecuting according to Jewish religious provisions, and paves the way for the preparation of the king, or the so-called chief rabbi, who does not necessarily rule in a democratic manner, end quote. Palestinian Shehab News reported that the deputy director of the Islamic Endowments Department in Jerusalem, Najeh Bakarat, quote, confirmed that the occupation government adopted the project to build the temple in the place of Al-Aqsa to make Jerusalem a Jewish capital through several steps and nonstop violations against the mosque, end quote. On Hamas station Al-Aqsa, Dr. Shihab said that, quote, the Israeli government has a plan to cause a religious war in the region. See, this is what, I'm open to many different possibilities. There's a lot of things that we don't know, especially when it comes to secret combinations. I'm not saying that this is the case, but if there are secret combinations involved, then maybe that's why this is going on. The Israeli government has a plan to cause a religious war in the region, and that bringing red heifers to Jerusalem shows that the fascist Israeli government encourages the settlers to continue harming Al-Aqsa Mosque. As proof, Dr. Shihab cited the crowds of Jews who visited the Temple Mount last Thursday for Tisha B'Av. Quote, the harm to the holiness of the Al-Aqsa Mosque last Thursday shows that settlers are working to Judaize the mosque, he concluded. It should be noted that Jews are not permitted to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It should also be emphasized that the ritual burning of the red heifer does not take place on the Temple Mount. It will be burned on the Mount of Olives at a location that was purchased by Bonei Israel. But it is not only Palestinians who object to the imminent red heifer ritual. Kavat HaKofesh, the Freedom Farm Sanctuary, dedicated to stopping the industrial farming of animals, posted on Facebook an appeal to save the red cows. Its petition has garnered over 5,700 signatures since last week. Okay, so things are already kind of crazy right now. We have this war that is really significant as far as wars go in Israel. It's not like the other wars. It kind of resembles the Yom Kippur War in that it was a completely surprise war. And so far, Israel is doing well. They're rooting out Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They're still operating up north, but they've moved into the south. And it's yet to be seen what happens once they complete their mission, and if that escalates things even further. So things are already tense. There's an actual war that's going on right now. But on top of that, we are now in that time frame when, as long as these heifers are still ritually pure, they're going to be turning 2 years and 1 day old, if they haven't already. And so if that news got out at a time like this, and maybe that's why we haven't heard anything, that could escalate things even more. You see what I mean? It's a very interesting time right now. So we'll just have to, keep an eye out and see if anyone says anything about it. But what do they do? Because I would think that as soon as they are ready, that you would want to take advantage of that, because you wouldn't want to risk, hairs changing colors, or you wouldn't want to risk something else, like one of the heifers getting sick or dying from something. You know what I mean? It's a very rare thing, and so I would think that you'd want to act right away. Now, when I was watching this video, he said that they intended to, like, there's been conferences. In fact, he was attending a conference in Houston, Texas, having to do with red heifers. And he said that they want to figure out how to reproduce more in the future. So he seemed to be saying that they may be exploring the possibility of if you have multiple red heifers that are all ritually pure, then keeping one or two and using them for breeding purposes and see if you can make more. But I would think that what would take precedence is, as soon as you have one, you might want to act right away. So if that's the case, then if that's what they do, if they're like, okay, we need to do this right away, then we might be seeing this happen within the next couple months, maybe even the next couple weeks, where you have Kohanim, which are the priests, take the red heifer to the Mount of Olives on that piece of land that Bnei Israel owns, I guess, and then doing this. So I think we're right there to something happening. Whether it leads somehow to the construction of the temple, I don't know. Whether it escalates things with this war and heightens tensions throughout the region, I don't know. If even just like the announcement of it, it would cause a lot of excitement throughout both the Jewish and the Christian world, or at least that portion of the Christian world that is really into eschatology and, end times type study. So I feel like something pretty big as far as this goes. Like, any way that you look at it, I feel like something big will come of it. We'll just have to wait and see. So to wrap this up, I wanted to read just a few things from our own church. I want to go to Millennial Messiah by Bruce R. McConkie. And he talks about the temple in Jerusalem. And this is what he says. I'll zoom in. Okay. Who are those that are far off who shall come to Jerusalem to build the house of the Lord? Surely they are the Jews who have been scattered afar. By what power and authority? By what power and under whose authorization shall the work be done? There's only one place under the whole heavens where the keys of temple building are found. There's only one people who know how to build temples and what to do in them when they are completed. That people is the Latter-day Saints. The temple in Jerusalem will not be built by Jews who have assembled there for political purposes as at present. It will not be built by a people who know nothing whatever about the sealing ordinances and their application to the living and the dead. It will not be built by those who know nothing about Christ and his laws and the mysteries reserved for the saints. But it will be built by Jews who have come unto Christ, who once again are in the true fold of their ancient shepherd, and who have learned anew about temples because they know that Elijah did come, not to sit in a vacant chair at some Jewish feast of the Passover, but to the Kirtland Temple on April 3rd, 1836, to Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery. The temple in Jerusalem will be built by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they that are afar off. They that come from an American Zion, they who have a temple in Salt Lake City, will come to Jerusalem to build there another holy house in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem portion of the mountains of the Lord, the mountain of the Lord's house. The mountains of the Lord's house. So that's what he said. And, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Again, I think that the BYU Jerusalem Center, just like the Independence Visitor Center in Independence, Missouri, is a temple in waiting. It's like already there. Who's to say that it isn't? I've tried to nail down if there's been anybody that said that it has to be on the Temple Mount. In Millennial Messiah, Bruce R. McConkie says it will be rebuilt, and maybe it'll even be on the same spot that the old one stood. And then the only other person that said anything about it is Charles W. Penrose. He was a member of the first presidency. And he said in a statement, I'm not going to look it up right now. I'm going to do a playlist, by the way, about, I'll do some playlist, whether it's about Jerusalem or whether it's about the third temple, but I'll read it there again. But anyway, he said it was his belief that it would be built on the Temple Mount. So if it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that builds the temple and it's going to be on the Temple Mount, then a lot of things are going to have to change for that to happen. But anyway, this is what Bruce R. McConkie said. That's something to keep in mind. And then as far as animal sacrifice goes, I've covered this a few times on the channel. Because you might think like, well, does it even matter? Like, would it matter to us in our church if they burnt this cow? I mean, it's not a sacrifice. It's part of becoming ritually pure. It's not a sacrifice. But would it even matter to us? I don't know that it would, but I can't really say either way. Let me just show you. Let me show you a couple quotes. One from Joseph Smith, another one from Joseph Fielding Smith. This is in the Institute Student Manual. I'm not going to the direct source. I've done that before. I'm just for simplicity's sake, we'll just use the Institute Student Manual. D&C 13, verse 1. What is meant by the sons of Levi offering an offering of righteousness unto the Lord? The prophet Joseph Smith commented as follows on this scripture, quote, "It is generally supposed that sacrifice was entirely done away when the great sacrifice, i.e. the sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ, was offered up, in that there will be no necessity for the ordinance of sacrifice in the future. But those who assert this are certainly not acquainted with the duties, privileges, and authority of the priesthood, or with the prophets. The offering of sacrifice has ever been connected and forms a part of the duties of the priesthood. It began with the priesthood and will be continued until after the coming of Christ, from generation to generation. These sacrifices, as well as every ordinance belonging to the priesthood, will, when the temple of the Lord shall be built, and the sons of Levi be purified, be fully restored and attended to in all their powers, ramifications, and blessings. This ever did and ever will exist when the powers of the Melchizedek priesthood are sufficiently manifest. Else, how can the restitution of all things spoken of by the holy prophets be brought to pass? It is not to be understood that the law of Moses will be established again with all its rites and variety of ceremonies. This has never been spoken of by the prophets. But those things which existed prior to Moses' day, namely the sacrifice, will be continued. Now, this whole thing with the red heifer, it shows up, if I remember right, it shows up in the book of Numbers. And so therefore, it seems that it would be part of the law of Moses. So based on what Joseph Smith just said, that wouldn't be necessary. Of course, it's not necessary for purity. That's not part of the church right now. I guess it was back then, but not now. Either way, for the Jews, it's significant. And if this leads to the building of the temple, and if that's how things play out, then so be it. But as far as our doctrine, no. And then continuing, President Joseph Fielding Smith further explained that, quote, "We are living in the dispensation of the fullness of times, into which all things are to be gathered, and all things are to be restored since the beginning. Even this earth is to be restored to the condition which prevailed before Adam's transgression. Now, in the nature of things, the law of sacrifice will have to be restored, or all things which were decreed by the Lord would not be restored. It will be necessary, therefore, for the sons of Levi, who offered the blood sacrifices anciently in Israel, to offer such a sacrifice again, to round out and complete this ordinance in this dispensation. Sacrifice by the shedding of blood was instituted in the days of Adam, and of necessity will have to be restored. The sacrifice of animals will be done to complete the restoration when the temple spoken of is built at the beginning of the millennium." So he's saying here at the beginning of the millennium, or in the restoration, blood sacrifices will be performed long enough to complete the fullness of the restoration in this dispensation. Afterwards, sacrifice will be of some other character. Okay, so let's go back to the spreadsheet. So there's still a lot of questions. Don't know exactly how everything's going to play out, but it seems that things are happening. Okay, it really seems like things are happening. We have the BYU Jerusalem Center that could be renovated, turned into a temple. Who knows? It may not have to be on the Temple Mount. If it is on the Temple Mount, maybe the Jews will build the third temple. And if so, well, this right here with the red heifers would be, well, like he said in that one article, it'd be like the key to starting the car. This is what turns the engine, turns the car on, whatever. So we just better pay attention and watch and see what happens. But we are right now in a very interesting several months. The time range between September of this year until April of next year, this seems to be a type of red zone when it, no pun intended, when it comes to these red heifers. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.